Dr. Iraj Abedian has got a very unique perspective. He was born in Iran, raised in Iran, came to South Africa in his early 20s, and the world loves that perspective. And I don't say that lightly. His talk from BNC 8, Business Conference in March, the short of that talk, the hardest hitting parts of it, has gone viral around the world. Millions of people literally have watched it. So he's a big name in America, even though he might not know it right now. But Dr. Abedian is with us to give us an update on how he sees things developing, giving us context on what this global focus point is going to show up in the next few days. Next few days, I guess, is probably a little bit of an overestimation, isn't it? Iraj, we are in a place now where the news headlines every day come back to what's going on in Iran. By the way, do you call it Iran or Iran or Iran, or what is the correct pronunciation?
Iran, and it's come from the Aryan, the land of the Aryan. So the pronunciation is Iran.
Iran. Okay. So right now, most of us are confused. You have a unique inside track into this. Can you start off with just an update? How are things inside Iran? Do you have any contact with people there?
Well, inside Iran, as you know, is exactly for 60 days, going 61 days of what they call it net blockade, meaning the government or the regime has literally cut off the nation from connectivity with the rest of the globe, with the exception of their own members who have what they call it a white SIM card, which enables them to connect. The rest of the nation is blocked out. There are here and there, with the help of different links and the Starlink, those who have, there are a couple of them, couple of hundred of them in the country, uh, so-called illegally, and it's a crime to have them. But nonetheless, I've seen various agencies and organizations, mostly human rights organizations, manage to receive information from inside the country. The most important is about the availability of food. Increasingly, inflation and shortage of medicine and food are becoming a real challenge for the nation. And of course, at the same time, and somewhat expectedly, as I highlighted back in March, that the regime in Iran is brutalizing those who have arrested, and every day uh, two or three people get publicly executed in order to make a lesson for the rest, and terrorize those who want to potentially rise up against the hardship that they experience. So I think inside it's a wartime environment as I see it. As I said, there is no connectivity. There isn't any opportunity to have a video or telephone call with anybody. Connections with my family is 30 seconds. They send a message, we are alive, or they have the 30 seconds whenever they get the opportunity to call and say, we are all together, everybody is okay, and then they get cut off. It's a tough time.
It's almost straight from the terror playbook that one has read over many of these organizations. You make an example of somebody by a public execution. That, to us here in South Africa, where we don't even have the death penalty, that is quite stark and quite jolting. But that's not the only thing that is different between living in Iran, even in normal times, and now here in our country.
Yeah, I think it is. It is, of course, the difficulty is the uncertainty that literally, like a cloud hanging over the nation. 90 odd million people. They don't know what's what's cutting out for them. Americans and Israelis and the Iranian regimes, they've kept the nation out of the loop, and therefore people don't know what deal is being made over their head and about their lives, and that uncertainty together with the fury and the sorrow that they have. Remember, 2 months ago, in January, the government massacred thousands upon thousands, arrested an estimated 200,000 people. So it's this milieu of fear, of mourning, of anger, and of not knowing what's being cut over their head for them and for their children.
I'd like us to explore the emotional impact of that in a moment, but if we can just look at the way you see the strategy, and just for people who don't know, you were very instrumental in putting great economic policies on the table here in South Africa. In fact, for a period of time, South Africa was growing fast, it was reducing its debt. Things were going really well until the Zuma regime got its corrupt hand onto the tiller. But up to that point, you'd been very instrumental in creating, helping to create the architecture. So when you look at that party, at that organization that you supported back then, that you helped to put onto the right road, what do you see today with the ANC, and in particular the way that it's handling its relationships with Iran?
I think that what has dramatically changed is the fact that the organization has lost its capability to learn and to correct and to listen and to get into a consultative process of hearing and assessing competing views and looking at the cost benefits analysis of a policy choice. During the last few months of President Mbeki's presidency, uh, a policy was put in place with his support, that any policy that gets adopted or is considered to be adopted should go through a fairly strict process of policy impact analysis. What are the consequences? Whatever the policy is, whether it's social, political, macroeconomic, microeconomic, sectoral, doesn't matter what, regional. And that policy impact analysis meant that you don't listen to one perspective. You look at different analysis because by its very nature, an economy, a society, and the cross section of the economy and politics, the so called political economy, is multifaceted. It's got short term, medium, long term consequences, and it's got impact on different parts of the society differently. Therefore, a policy for for the sake of national welfare and national security and national interest, has to listen to diverse views and come up with a policy impact analysis before the policymakers even consider tabling it. Therefore, that was, in my view, one of the best frameworks for the modern societies that are so complex, the global economy, which is becoming more and more complex. Now, that was dropped, literally eliminated from policymaking process. And today, we do not see that. As a result of it, both the ANC and the government very seldom, if at all, they look at policy impact analysis in the context of national interest. Therefore, they either choose connectional policy analysis. In other words, this minister knows somebody else for other purposes. They choose a policy, or it becomes ideological, which by definition means it's not any longer multidimensional. It's either one or two aspects are looked at, and then they choose the policy, they move ahead, and they live with the consequences down the line, which is too late. So I think what has happened since then, which is almost 20 odd years, we've had this a lack of policy impact analysis for our international relations, for our national macroeconomic, as well as sectoral analysis. And that's why the economy and the political economy of South Africa, unfortunately, went off the rail and remains off the rail. And therefore, we see the impact of it: growth sub 1%, very vulnerable, very stressed. Our fiscal situation is very fragile, and our society is very vulnerable.
Sure, that's really so well put. And I think joining the dots in that way will enable any South African to say, but hang on, it was like someone who went into our house and took away one of the foundations of it. And well, the lunatics were able then to run the asylum. But getting back to the strategy, it's an area that you know very well. If you have a look at inside Iran right now, the strategy from the United States and Israel, Operation Fury, was bomb the hell out of them, as Donald Trump put it, and to assassinate a lot of the leaders. How is that playing out today, or how has that evolved to what we're seeing today with the ceasefire?
I think that policy was predicated upon the fact that if I bomb the hell out of them, and if they see the fury and my commitment and the technological superiority that I have, at some point rationality will prevail and uh, self control or survival instinct will kick in, and they'll come to the table and we'll have a sensible deal. That was the assumption on the part of Americans. Of course, I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, but that was the strategy. However, as they've learned, and I've warned against it, and many others, it's not a secret that the hard core of the regime in Iran is not a rational self-interest, if you like, cost-benefit analysis beings. They are creatures of apocalyptic commitment, with a mission to achieve it at all costs and at all expenses to the nation. So, whereas a normal, on average government would care about the welfare of their nations, for them, the nations are fodder to be used, to be sacrificed, if you prefer, if you use their language, to be sacrificed for the overriding objective that they have. So, President Trump has realized that bombing was a necessary condition, is not a sufficient condition, and you can have military success as US has had and Israelis have had, but you may have political failure or political impasse. At the moment, they've reached the point of, yes, we have shown what we can do militarily. We can bomb the hell out of you, and Alec, they've thrown, as per their own estimates, over 25,000 bombs into that country and on the facilities. A lot of them military facilities, but some of them also petrochemical industry, steel and related industries, and cement industries, etc., etc. So the infrastructure and the industry and the industrial base of that economy has been not wiped out, but definitely crippled. As a result, you have 1 million jobs lost, and that was on top of already a very, very super stressed economic conditions. Therefore, the internal conditions from a societal point of view was explosive. It has become hyper explosive. And that has put the regime under internal threat. And part of the net blockade that I refer to, the the sort of banning of international connectivity, is because the regime is extremely conscious and worried that if people start expressing their and showing their reality, it's going to put them down. Therefore, the political impasse is on both sides. The Iranian regime has got a real political problem at home, which is the real enemy of the regime is not the United States or Israel. The other impasse that has been created is, whereas 3 months ago, the perception was, and to some extent the reality was, that the real enemy in the Middle East against the regime was Israel, because they felt existential threat by this regime. All the missiles and drones and technology was built over 30 odd years to eliminate the state of Israel. However, during the war, what became clear is that UAE, United Arab Emirates, in fact, all the Arab the neighboring countries were attacked. It is revealing that UAE received more missiles and drones thrown at it than Israel, and therefore, in the course of this confrontation and devastation, the the enemy changed. It's no longer that Israel and the regime in Iran. It's now regime of Iran and UAE and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Bahrain and Oman and Jordan, who say, look, we are under threat now. We can't. America cannot leave. This is a half-finished job, and the Israelis, for the moment, are sitting back because they are no longer the prime the frontline enemy. So what has happened is the impasse has now become regional. The United States has, in a way, drawn to, and not President Trump especially eliminated or excluded two variables from the equation. One was that I don't want a regime change. I want the regime to change itself. In other words, I want to get like Venezuela, take one gangster out, the other one will cooperate with me. That was one major, if you like, no go area, a variable eliminated. The second variable was that we are not going to put American soldiers at risk. So we are not bringing uh, foot soldiers to occupy either part or sections of the war zone. And those two variables excluding from the equation meant that the regime in Iran said, look, I can then drag this on. I know you're not bringing soldiers. I know you're not going to change my regimes. So what happened then? America and Israel eliminated or assassinated, better put, assassinated 50, 60 top leaders. Another 40, 50 came up. They assassinated those. Another crowd came out, like onion that you peel. And as they got closer to the core, every layer that came out was more fanatic, more anti American, less reconciliatory, and less uh, willing to negotiate. And therefore, if you look at the latest exchange of their ideals, President Trump's put 15 points and they put 10 points, and these are completely different agenda for negotiations. So the meetings and negotiations literally broke down. So Trump has suddenly realized that, look, I can't negotiate with these guys. They're getting worse, not better. And I can't bomb going on and on because that's also not sustainable. So they ended up to what was expected and possibly would have been predictable, that the best way is to cut out their oxygen, as they call it, blockade the naval after having destroyed the naval force, blockade the ports, and specifically blockade the export of oil, which is the main revenue of regime in Iran. And therefore, the impasse at the moment, as we speak, is a political impasse, which is about who can drag this out longer. Can Trump, with all the pressure back at home, with all the pressure on the global economy from Europe and elsewhere, can he sit it out 6 months, 7 months, 9 months? Of course, his predictions is that 3 weeks is the maximum that they can handle. And that is based on the following assumption that the oil extraction of oil wells, Iran has run out of storage places. The storage tanks are full, the ships are full, and they cannot leave. And therefore, if they force the regime to make the following choices, to actually bring the extraction of oil, which is incredibly detrimental, destructive, is as bad as bombing them. Uh, at some point, they'll see that they have no choice but to accept what Trump calls it, sign the submission statement. And of course, the Iranian regime is now, in a way, escalating it from a regional point of view to an international one, resorting to negotiations with Russia, with China, and so on and so forth. So that is where we are at the moment. Which one will manage to sit it out? It's like a game of chickens played over the lives of 90 million people.
But it all started, all of the protests started when there were economic strains in Iran. It's well known that it began in amongst the traders. And surely that now would be a part of the whole grand scheme of Trump and co in their blockade, that they will put more and more pressure on and that the people of Iran will come to the party. Are they able to, though? You know, it reminds me a lot of what happened in Germany towards the end of World War II, where it was clear they were losing, and yet Hitler did not give up until he literally committed suicide in his bunker. Is that kind of fanaticism prevalent here? And because the German people didn't stand up and surrender or cut a peace deal, why would we think that the Iranian regime would?
Yeah, I think that is beginning to take effect at two levels. One is within the regime structure itself. For the first time, they openly confront each other. Two camps have emerged, both of them equally fanatic, but one says we must fight it out. The other one says, fight, we're going to lose. Let's sit it out and negotiate and find ourselves a breathing space so that we can rise another day, keep the fight going. So at the moment, there is a really super internal battle between the two emerging power bases within the regime itself. And they are getting more and more, I would say, violent. They're getting more and more aggressive against each other. Of course, at the same time, the economic hardship is beginning to bite. And you quite correctly pointed out that late in December, it is started by the traders whose economy was under stress because the currency lost 50% of its value or more. Now, of course, now we have inflation at around average 140% since the start of war. For foodstuff, cooking oil, 250% price increases. Medicine, if you can find it, you can't put any percentage to it because it's really incredibly stressful and consequential for human lives. And that is where my biggest concern is how many millions of people are at the risk of literally lives because basic medicine is not available. Plastic bags are are in short supply, and bread, which is the essential food in Iran, is now prices have gone up over the past 2 months by 160% as of yesterday. And it's really accelerates. As you know, inflation and hyperinflation, when it sits in, the rate at which it accelerates becomes no longer quarterly and monthly and annual, it becomes daily, and ultimately, as in Germany, hyperinflation becomes annual and per minute. It's ridiculous to think of it, but that's the reality of hyperinflation. So at the moment, the economy is in the early days of hyperinflation. Shortages are emerging. People are now fighting for no longer their businesses, and so on. They're beginning to fight for their existence. And of course, bear in mind that even before the war started, back in November, December, the hardship was unbearable. That's why it led to the almost a spontaneous groundswell of opposition, which led to the massacres and so on and so forth. Now that dynamics is at play at the same time that within the regime there is a splinter happening, there is infighting, and quite frankly, it appears to me, and I'm no strategist, it appears to me, listening to different political and social strategies, that the Trump administration says, okay, we will maintain the blockade, and then you can kill yourselves. We are not going to kill you. You can kill yourselves, and what is left of you, the people will, out of absolute zeal for life and for existence, they will uprise at some or other point. When that point comes in, will it be a month? Will it be a week? Nobody knows.
Yeah. So, Iraj, the parallels with South Africa's ideological approach are quite stark here as well. But I suppose the real issue is that South Africa is putting itself at risk with its alignment with the Iranian regime. Is that is that ameliorating it to some degree? We are seeing some positive signs coming out of certainly the new US ambassador here. It's not as hostile, the messages that are coming from Washington. We now got Rolf Meyer going over to maybe put some or calm the waters there. What's your reading?
I think South African, for our national interest, we need to moderate and we need to reset our relationships. It's not to be against China, against Russia, or against America. We need to remain in this particular environment. And like going forward, uh, it's a terrible thing to say that we should benefit from this horrible, destructive war that's been happening. The reality is that the South African economy, with this incredible national endowment, if we can reset our policies properly and realign it in a technical but non-aligned but highly commercial self-interest way, we could get this economy to grow well above 4% in the next 3 years. But that would require a policy impact analysis, which I referred to earlier, sitting around the table, private and public sector, looking at national interest and not going ideological or betting on who will win. Will Iran win or will America win? We cannot be in that game. A national interest cannot be, in a way, made a playground of ideological selection. It got to be based on the realities of global economy. And let me just unpack it very quickly. We're going to see an incredible boost in military spending in the next decade, in the Middle East and elsewhere. We're going to see Europe wanting to protect itself as NATO becomes weaker, but a similar regional NATO at the moment as we speak is in evolution in the Middle East. We're going to have different lines of not ideological but security alliances, which is very, very interesting, but very importantly, uh, opportunities for investment in mineral and beneficiation and all kinds of minerals, not just rare minerals, rare earth minerals, from basic iron ore, manganese, chrome, everything, of which South Africa has got plenty, and we are one of the top 10 reservoirs of these. The demand will continue. Investment is highly likely to chase these opportunities. South Africa is well placed, but our policies are not properly orchestrated. Therefore, a policy impact analysis at a national level would say, let's very quickly align our strategic national, international alignments, not with any particular camp, because we don't know in 10 years' time what the multipolar world will look like. But what we do know is that the world will need these inputs that we have. Therefore, investment opportunities are plenty in South Africa, and we need to exploit those for our national benefits without taking side, without having to bet which one will win.
What are the likely prospects of that happening, of having this reset by those who are in power in this country, in the government of national unity?
And look, I'm a firm believer that the days that governments could govern on their own or develop the nation on their own is long past. That is true of Germany and France and US and everywhere else, as well as South Africa. Therefore, the likelihood of it depends, in my humble view, on how much we promote a national discourse within the country, not against ANC or against DA or against EFF, but to bring a sense of opportunity for the nation. The more we create a discourse through public discussions, through what we are doing now, the more sanity will prevail and national interest will take the center stage, as opposed to partisan interest or ideological interest. That's where my firm belief is at the moment.
Well, a fantastic way to end this conversation. Dr. Iraj Abedian will be at the Biz News conference in the Berg. We are taking the BNIC3, the Biz News Investment Conference, our mid-year conference. That's going to the Drakensberg. That will be at Champagne Sports Resort. There are many accommodation options around if you don't want to stay in the hotel itself. So we are opening it up to as many people as possible. Dr. Abedian will be there to take us through the geopolitical issues. It's going to be on the 11th to the 13th of August this year, something not to miss. And as I mentioned earlier, it was a treat what he shared in the Biz News flagship conference in Hermanus in March, which will be back again next March. But the almost like the midway point that you can go to, especially more accessible for our tribe in Gauteng and in KZN, is in the beautiful Drakensberg. So join us there. Iraj, thank you again for the conversation today and for updating us and for opening eyes, not least mine. I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.
Thank you.